It's looking more likely that the mid-Atlantic sees Tropical Storm Ophelia this weekend. It's Lee Weather Team meteorologist Joe Martucci. We have another edition of Hurricane Hunt for you here. And in this video, we're going to go in depth. We're going to be talking about rainfall totals. We're going to be talking about wind speeds, when that rain starts and stops. So if you are in South Carolina, North Carolina, Virginia, hey, even New Jersey and Pennsylvania, this video is for you because we're going to go through all those details. Tropical storm warnings are already out for what may be Ophelia. It's not a tropical cyclone yet. Heavy rain and wind, my biggest concern from South Carolina up to New Jersey. And then Nigel and another storm are two other things we're looking out for in the Atlantic Ocean. We have storm surge watches in effect from Chickatee Island over in Virginia down to Morehead City, North Carolina, and even a little bit further south than that. This is in effect until further notice. This means to plan for storm surge. Storm surge is not imminent. If it is, then we'll get a warning. Speaking of warnings, we have a tropical storm warning in effect from the North Carolina-South Carolina border all the way up to Ocean City, Maryland. Now, this is probably not the end of this. The National Hurricane Center may extend those warnings a little bit further northward into Delaware, perhaps even New Jersey. We'll keep you updated with that. Tropical storm watch in effect for most of South Carolina. It's not a warning because there is some hope that this really avoids being a tropical cyclone until it gets north of there. So some good news for you in South Carolina, I do believe. That system that we're watching out for is right now between Florida and Bermuda. That's where you're seeing those blues and some of those oranges on our water vapor satellite. There's also another storm out towards the Cape Verde Islands off the west coast of Africa. That we will monitor over the next 7 to 10 days as it does move west and eventually to the north and west. And then we have Hurricane Nigel down in the open Atlantic, only really impacting the shipping lanes and the fish there. It's a Category 1 storm. It is as far north as Boston, Massachusetts, and is screaming at a rapid pace in the northeast at 30 miles an hour. Here's a look at what could be Ophelia. Right now, this is called Potential Tropical Cyclone 16. It is just a low-pressure system right now, but it could turn into a tropical storm over time. In fact, the National Hurricane Center says it will as we go into early Friday. And by Friday at 8 p.m., here's the location of the storm. The center of the storm is south of Morehead City, North Carolina. But as I'm going to show you in the future cast, most of the impacts are well north of the center of the storm. So, at this point, Friday at 8 p.m., it'll already start raining in Maryland and Delaware, but see how far away the center of the storm actually is. So we don't have to pay too much attention to the eye of the storm, but it does look like if this becomes a tropical storm and it's Ophelia, it would make landfall somewhere between Morehead City and then the Outer Banks. Do note there's still a completely offshore route if it takes the far eastern part of the cone here. But you see as it just treks through Virginia, the Delmarva Peninsula, and then into New Jersey, but it should turn into a remnant storm Sunday morning, a post-tropical cyclone, and then eventually just moving out to sea as just a remnant low. There is the potential that if you live in Maryland, Delaware, New Jersey, it could make landfall as a tropical cyclone because we're kind of a couple different factors at play. If it stays off the coast, the center storm stays off the coast, there's warm water to work with, so it allows it to stay as a tropical storm for longer. But if it stays further west here, those areas, Delaware, Maryland, New Jersey, could be having a tornado risk instead. So always different things to balance out there. Here's a zoom out look at the entire tropical tracker here throughout the next couple of days. Take a look at our water temperatures right now. You see we're at or above 80 degrees, even around 80 degrees as far north as Hatteras. That L is where you see the remnant, what is the potentially Ophelia right now. And then Hurricane Nigel's that big one you see swirling out there in the North Atlantic. So, this low-pressure system that could become Ophelia, like we've been saying, has a short runway to work with. It has to become tropical by the time it hits North Carolina. If it doesn't, it's just too cold and will just stay as what we would call a coastal storm or a nor'easter here. That being said, let's take a look at the storm threats. Let's get a little bit deeper into what you can expect in your area here. My biggest concern, the rainfall flooding. Scattered to widespread areas of rainfall flooding will be around here. There will be pockets of wind damage. There will be tidal flooding, and it could even be major stage flooding for parts of the James River and Virginia here. But I think all in all, we'll go with the moderate risk for that. And then isolated tornadoes look to be around here. The further west this storm is within the cone, the higher risk for a few tornadoes here. So just keep that in mind. Here's a look at what one computer model is saying in terms of rain and clouds. So this is Thursday at 3 o'clock. We're already getting some of the cloud cover in New Jersey. And the center of this storm is off the coast of Jacksonville, Florida. So again, a lot of the focus of the storm is actually going to be north of the eye. As we go into our Thursday here, we're going to still be dry, but the first rain bands come in as we go into early on Friday here, getting into the Outer Banks and into North Carolina. It's a heavy rain when it first hits, and from about Myrtle Beach all the way into the Outer Banks and portions of eastern North Carolina, soaking flooding rain here for your Friday morning. Starts to get into Norfolk and in Richmond as we go into Friday afternoon, and then you're seeing a soaking rain as you go into Friday night. But do also notice Friday at 8 o'clock, even though the center of the storm is off about Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, it's raining in New Jersey at this point. We go into Saturday. The eye of the storm would actually make landfall in North Carolina in this scenario. Really heavy rain in New Jersey and into Pennsylvania with some areas of flooding around. But for the Carolinas and Richmond, Saturday, really during the daytime hours, probably going to have a decent amount of dry time here. And when it rains, it won't be as heavy as that initial shot here. So we continue as we go into our Saturday night. North Carolina's dry by sunset. Even Richmond's dry by the evening times. And then we still have some additional rain to talk about in New Jersey and Pennsylvania into Saturday night. And this forecast model is saying that this is going to go into New England as we go into Sunday and bring rain there. Remember, there's still some room for error in terms of who's exactly going to see rain then. But in generalities, this will be mainly a Friday soaker for Florence, South Carolina, up into Richmond, Virginia. This is mainly a Saturday soaker for places like Fredericksburg, Virginia, on north into Carlisle, Pennsylvania, and Atlantic City as well. You see these rainfall totals. Somewhere on the northeast side of the eye of the storm is going to see 4 to 6 inches of rain, and that's why I'm really concerned about this roadway flooding here. If your basement floods and you're in Richmond area or you're in Elizabeth City, North Carolina, you're going to want to make sure you take preparations now, and some streams and creeks will be flooding too. And that's separate from the coastal flooding that we'll see, the tidal kind of flooding. We'll get into our winds here. We have Myrtle Beach, Outer Banks, Richmond, and Atlantic City for you. We'll take you into Friday here, Friday morning. Winds are howling at the Outer Banks, and then they get into the 30s in the Outer Banks by Friday afternoon here. 39 miles an hour is tropical storm force. I don't think we're going to see sustained winds that strong, but there'll certainly be gusts that strong from Myrtle Beach on up into the Outer Banks on Friday. Then the eye makes landfall somewhere in North Carolina, according to this model here. Start to see as we go into the Outer Banks, 39 miles an hour sustained winds, just getting to tropical storm force strength. And then Atlantic City sees these strong winds as we go into Saturday here. And then as it goes into Sunday, it's more of a New England storm and into Long Island as well. Wave heights are going to be a problem here. Not as high as what we saw during Lee last week, but we are still going to see wave heights out in the open waters, 15 to 20 feet in those yellowish areas. High risk for rip currents. Surf is going to be bad as well. But unlike last weekend, where the weather was nice with these conditions, the weather's not going to be so nice. So I think a number of us will be staying inside anyway and not wanting to go to the beach. But these waves will continue as we go all throughout the weekend. Saturday and Sunday, it's more in Delaware and New Jersey by this point. So to recap with our tropical notes here on this edition of Hurricane Hunt, tropical storm warnings out already from the North Carolina, South Carolina border up to Ocean City, Maryland for what may be Ophelia. Heavy rain and wind, big concerns. We talked about that, especially if you're right along the coastline. And then we have Nigel, which again spinning in the open Atlantic, and another storm to look out for as well. We hope you found this edition of Hurricane Hunt useful. We'll have more information on your favorite local news website. And while we're at it, make sure to subscribe to our Across the Sky podcast. We talk about wind-related bounce house incidents with the professor who researched it all from the University of Georgia on our latest episode.